It's been just over a month now since Bethesda revealed their latest creation, Starfield. Finally, a new game from a company who continues to produce sequel after sequel of their most beloved franchises. The Elder Scrolls and Fallout are still some of the biggest franchises in gaming today. But it's been over a decade since we had an Elder Scrolls game, and the new one is not on the horizon anytime soon. And while it's fair to say, the Fallout franchise hasn't exactly gone in the direction that Bethesda would have wanted with the release of Fallout 76. But whilst Bethesda's track record as of late hasn't exactly been the best, and fans like myself have been very concerned over their future, the release of the Starfield trailer and reveal event in general has me extremely hyped for the next game. But should I be? And should you be, more importantly? Firstly, let's take a little look at why people like me are so concerned over Bethesda. The 2000s decade was absolutely superb from Bethesda. We saw some absolute masterpiece games such as Morrowind, Oblivion and Fallout 3. We have to look no further than the Fallout franchise itself to really see what's happened to Bethesda. You see, the release of Fallout 4 in 2015 was pretty mixed. I personally really enjoyed the game and think it's still one of Bethesda's better games. To me, it still has that Bethesda charm. It allows the player to explore an open world where the stories aren't told to the player in black and white and instead are left open to interpretation. There's some interesting NPCs you'll find on your travels, alongside a variety of side quests which will have you doing a lot of different things in the open world. Fallout 76 on the other hand is a complete mess, and probably deserves another video on its own, which I might make at some point. But to condense it quickly for you, the main issue I have with Fallout 76 is that it completely took away the charm that Bethesda games have. This charm created through interesting locations, NPCs and side quests is ripped out of this game completely. This to me really exposes the rough edges that Bethesda games have. And it's no surprise really, because they've been using the same engine for almost 20 years now. So that's a little quick recap for you, of the highest point of Bethesda in the mid-2000s to the lowest point of Bethesda, which came after the release of Fallout 76. It's fair to say then, Bethesda really do need another hit, so they can recapture their spot of the company who makes the most elite, immersive RPGs on the market. So how's about you take all the ideas you've implemented in the Fallout franchise and the Elder Scrolls franchise, both of which have had multiple decades to expand and create ideas that will become staples in Starfield. So last year, Bethesda would officially reveal parts of the game with about 8 minutes of gameplay, and well, it looked pretty bad, let's be honest here. The gameplay they showed looked really outdated and very clunky. The graphics were average, and the gameplay didn't even look like a step up from Fallout 4, which came out 8 years ago now. So going into this reveal a month ago, I was not only skeptical of Bethesda due to their previous work such as Fallout 76 and Fallout 4, but was also worried at the gameplay they had shown of this game that was just simply below standard. I mean seriously, if you're going to show 8 minutes of your new big project, it's got to be good. So a month ago, when I sat down to watch that reveal event, my expectations were very low. Bethesda's track record and the recent announcement had completely finished off the hype for me. But just 45 minutes later, and I was absolutely fascinated by what Starfield can provide as a game. The open world and exploration looks to recapture what Fallout 76 couldn't do and bring back that Bethesda charm that we all love. I can't pretend that I'm not a bit worried about the random generation with the planets. No Man's Sky did it, and they've eventually got it right, but can Bethesda get it right on their first time? I'm not so sure. But the actual planets that have been handcrafted by Bethesda look absolutely incredible. The city they showed off is the largest one they've ever made, and the love and detail that's gone into that is there for everyone to see. I also like the different factions and different vibes each planet will have. They showed off a western town, which is a complete contrast to the futuristic city they showed off. And I'm really hoping that this goes hand in hand with the role-playing aspect of the game, and how you can choose what type of character you want to be, and then maybe set up your base on the planet that most suits your character. Something like this is what is going to give the game a lot of replayability, similar to the base building in Fallout 4 or the house building in Skyrim, stuff you can spend a lot of time on and not do the main quest. When you add to this the skill tree they showed off, and you have a game that not only has an interesting looking main quest that they also showed off, but a game where you can take your own path and end up making your own fun, which is at the core of every good Bethesda game we've had in the past, and is a very promising sign. But this is still mostly stuff that I expect from Bethesda. Even with their troubles over recent games, they are still to me the company that put out some of the most immersive RPGs on the market, and therefore I expect no less from their big project. These are things that Bethesda are known to be great at, and with the poor reception of Fallout 76 not having these features to the level we expect, I would expect Bethesda to therefore keep improving on the core pillars of their title to ensure that the foundation of Starfield is strong. But what about the stuff that I'm not so certain about? And mainly, the stuff that we've never really seen Bethesda attempt before. To start with, I want to answer the question if Bethesda are really capable of implementing these features. Are they really a progressive company in the year 2023? For example, in the past, they were able to turn Fallout, which is a top-down role-playing game, into a full-blown, first-person role-playing game experience. Or even the little details, like the ability to sprint in Bethesda's new games, which in their previous titles seemed impossible. So how does this relate to Starfield? Well, in my opinion, this is the boldest step Bethesda have ever made, with the introduction of space travel and randomly generated planets, and this is where I have my concerns. Whilst at the time, Bethesda switching from the top down to first person with the Fallout franchise seemed revolutionary, but with a bit of hindsight, it might not be as revolutionary as we first thought. Many other games were already using first person, and they were using it pretty well. However, how many games can you name today that are using randomly generated planets or randomly generated areas in general and end up keeping you interested throughout their worlds? Minecraft probably does it best, but the way you experience a game like Minecraft is much different, with you really steering in the direction of what story you want to tell, rather than the game leaving you hints and letting you piece together the story. Another game like this is No Man's Sky, which if you've seen my video on it, which I totally recommend you check out, you will know that it took them years to get the random generation right, and they're still at a level where it's not quite perfect. I feel that the stories told in Bethesda's previous titles won't be able to be told in random generation, and these little hints that Bethesda give you of something that may have happened in this area just simply won't be there. These points of interest that are randomly generated, you might visit once, and you might see them on another planet, but once you've seen it once, you've probably already seen all there is to see. There's been reports of over 1,000 planets in Starfield, and I do have to question, is this really necessary? I totally get that on one hand, it creates this aspect of a game where you feel like you will always be exploring and you'll never run out of things to explore, which for a space game is kind of necessary. But at the same time, I just think that they could have a couple hundred planets or even 100 planets and still achieve the same feeling. Games like Fallout 3 or even Skyrim, their maps aren't that huge on first glance, but once you get exploring, you just realise the amount of detail put into them, and they are endless fun, and you will still find new places to this day. So overall in Starfield, I do believe there will be a solid amount of planets Bethesda have really worked on to keep up that same level of exploration as seen in games like Skyrim. There will also be lots that just feel like barren wastelands, which might be cool to simulate that sort of Fallout experience, but there's just going to be a lot of them in my opinion. It's also quite obvious that these main planets are going to be ones tied to the main quest, so I do wonder what the side quests are going to be like. Are they also going to be on these same planets? Or are they going to be fetch quests where you go to these barren wastelands and get useless items? Another key area of the game that I'm a bit skeptical about is the space travel, as we've never seen Bethesda try anything like this before. In their previous titles, we've only seen transport of two different methods, and that is on foot and by horse. So for them to be now trying space travel, where you can craft your own spaceship, is quite intimidating. I'm sure they've worked for hours to ensure that it's not so much of a scary proposition, but I still have my reservations, and I do think that on launch it could be a mess. I do think a lot of the issues that I've just gone over will be launch issues, and will probably be ironed out eventually, but Bethesda really can't afford to do that, and we as a player base should not let them do that to us again. Starfield should be the start of Bethesda's redemption arc, not another AAA title gone to the wayside of poor development and corporate greed. Because you can blame Bethesda, you can blame Microsoft, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Because if this game fails, they would have failed to recapture the imagination of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of players. And that will finally prove to me that Bethesda are not capable of making a AAA game that is quality enough anymore. I don't even want to get started on the engine they're using, because if I find out it's the same one they've been using for the last 20 years, then I would believe this game is already doomed to begin with. And I do quickly want to mention at the end of this section that yes, this game will run at 30 frames, and that is a huge issue for me. This wouldn't have been so much a problem 10 years ago, but we've become so used to 60 FPS games and even 120 FPS games now that it's going to be very noticeable that this game is lacking compared to countless games on the market, including so many AAA games that have taken the switch to 60 or 120 frames. This obviously once again comes down to the large amount of planets and generation that has to take place, which is another reason I don't think it's necessary to sacrifice the performance of the game. The graphics probably have something to do with this as well, and I don't understand why companies focus so much on graphics nowadays instead of performance. I would much rather a game looking like Fallout 4, which is decent and looks like a 2015 game, than a game like a 2023 game that still runs at 30 FPS, but looks incredible. This might have already ruined some people's interest in the game, and I'm not surprised, because if they don't implement a 60 FPS feature, I can see a lot of people being fed up with this game early on. Okay, now that I've got my skepticism out of the way, what are my real thoughts on Starfield and Bethesda as a whole? I can't hide the fact that I'm incredibly excited for this game. That showcase really won me over, and it's really something Bethesda had to do just a few months before release. More on the subject of the release, and I will definitely be trying this game on release, because it's on Xbox Game Pass. And if you're someone like me, and has some skepticism regarding Bethesda's recent track record, I would totally recommend you get the Game Pass for a month and try it out that way, as it saves you buying the whole game for about £70. As someone who's fascinated by space, and someone who loves No Man's Sky, which once again, I'll drop a little plug for my No Man's Sky video, I've always wondered what a story-driven game like this would look like, and that really looks like what we're getting with Starfield. Also, seeing some of these planets with more realistic graphics to a game like No Man's Sky is going to look incredible, and I have no doubts that the graphical aspects of the game are going to be stunning in certain areas. If Bethesda can ensure that the ship combat, ship travel, and random planet generation is revolutionary, then I do think this game will be a massive success. We all know that Bethesda can make a fantastic RPG, but the big question is, can they make a fantastic space RPG? And that's the real question with Starfield.